Hello, folks. This is Rebecca Adams, and I have Becky Vermeer with me again, thankfully. Say hello, Becky.
Hello. Do
Love that
you
Mrs.
think we'll ever
Doubtfire.
stop finding that funny?
No, I just love it. I think I'm always going to laugh at that because I love that movie. Mrs. Doubtfire is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to mention that when I found out that you had a support group and that, they encouraged me to come and all that and invited me and told me when it was and all that, I was scared. I was really, really scared to come. And I didn't I didn't know how it was going to be run. I didn't know what was going to be expected of me, this sort of thing. I would just from the huge amount of help that I've gotten from the two groups I talked about, but that's not the only two groups, but
Yeah.
I would really encourage anybody who has an opportunity to do something like that has been through any kind of violence, whatever, uh, dive in.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're going to have leaders that are going to be like Becky and her staff that don't require that people talk if they don't want to. Um, but it ended up being my favorite thing about the shelter.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you about the situation one time? A couple of my advocates were frustrated because we had a resident that wanted to come. Excuse me.
You're
We
fine.
had a resident that wanted to come to support group, but she didn't want to participate. And in fact, she would come in. I think I've told you this before. She would come in and sit on the couch and wrap her legs up, like hold her legs and pull a hood over her head so you couldn't see her face. And so they thought maybe she was sleeping because she was just sitting in there and she was not participating in any way. And I said to them exactly what you're just saying is, did you ever consider that maybe she's intimidated to talk in the group situation? That perhaps she's, I don't know what we got going on here, that perhaps she's gaining the information that she needs, but she's not at a place in her life where she feels comfortable sharing her story.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what you could do, if it's bothering you, is you could actually pull her aside and say, would you benefit more from having one-on-one conversations with us? Because we'd be willing to do that. So they did. And guess what the answer was?
No, she wanted to be in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't want the one-on-one. I'm learning and I'm absorbing things that I need to hear, and I'm absorbing how to heal and how you've processed and how you cope. I'm not comfortable at this stage in my life sharing my information. That does not mean I'm disrespecting you. And so she even said, I'm sorry if you feel like I'm disrespecting you.
Yeah.
But she said, this is the way that I need to behave. Well, from that moment on, come to group and sit there and cover your face and do your thing. But it needed to be the outsider that wasn't sitting in the group that night. When they came, they honestly came to complain. And I understand why. Like, I get it when you're trying to hold a group and someone's seemingly taking up space but not really participating. I get it. But that's what I said to them. We need to find out why.
Mm-hmm.
No, you can't tell her she can't come to group. And you need to find out why.
Yeah.
So that's what they did. And we'll then come to find out that's what she did. Well, then we let people stay at the shelter for 90 days. And then so somewhere around, I can't remember now, halfway through her stay, there was no hood. And there was a person sitting in the room making eye contact with the other people. And then later on, there was a person sitting in the room making eye contact with other people, talking to other people. But it was the process. And so, what I said a little while ago, just because you've gotten yourself into a situation where you're able to escape your abuser does not mean you're healed.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't mean you're ready to tell everybody on the planet your story.
Mm-mm.
You may have to hear yourself tell it to yourself before you can share it with anybody else. It's a lot to process.
It is.
So we have to respect people where they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that, again, to be repetitive, but doing so anyway, we're all on a journey somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
we
haven't heard
all
that
heal at
story.
different times in different spaces.
Exactly. I haven't heard that story in a long time. So yes, I do recall you telling that. And I think that was one of the things that was healing for me was listening to the feedback from the other women.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so similar to me. just
Mhm.
almost every single answer around the room. It didn't matter how many were in the room.
Right.
It was incredible. Yeah. And it helped me relax knowing that I'm not the oddball in the room,
Yeah,
and it helped me process
absolutely.
it helped me process the fact that somebody else was going through the same thing.
The commonality is so important, or the sense of community is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that we learned is when we, in our early days of providing shelter, we used hotel placement as a chief means of shelter, and there was no community.
Mm-mm.
People were safe and they were receiving services, but there was no community, and that community makes all the difference in the world, because it's very common that when a person's able to escape that abusive relationship, and I've heard people say, it's written on my forehead. Everybody that I meet knows that I'm a victim. It's written on my forehead.
Mm.
And when you come into a room of several people who feel the same way, they have the eraser somehow. It's not written on your forehead anymore. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's not just me, it's all of us.
Yeah.
And so now there's a belonging. I mean, it's not a club people want to belong to. That's not what I mean. But there's that belonging of, these people know my shorthand. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to explain all of that stuff. These people know my shorthand.
Mm.
And that's powerful.
It is. It's like I said in my book, it's a sisterhood we never signed up for,
Mm-hmm.
but we all understand each other.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect quote.
Yeah. There are a few things that I can remember exactly how I worded it, but I added that extra phrase just now. I should have
Yeah.
put it in the book. I like that added phrase there.
You want to do a quick edit, would you? Throw that in there.
Right, right. I actually do in the future. I have some changes I want to make to the book, so I'll have to add that in there.
I just think it's funny. The edited version has 6 more words than the original text.
You're good. So I wanted to mention one thing you brought up. You talked about case management.
Yeah.
And one phrase that you used, you said, I'll walk with you through that. Literally, all I wanted to do when I heard you and your staff say that to me each time, I just wanted to cry. I mean, bawl to the point that I couldn't have talked if I'd tried, because that went so deep. I had felt so alone, just horribly alone in that home with myself, my ex-husband, and our 3 kids. And I felt alone. We could go out to where there was a big group of people, and I felt so alone, even if he was standing there with me. Felt so alone. And the fact that you and your staff would look me in the eye and say, okay, you just tell me what your goals are and I'll walk with you through that. And I wanted to just dissolve into a puddle of tears. That meant so much to me, that somebody would be willing to walk with me through whatever path I chose to take, for my life. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, you've heard me make that statement before about, several people have said it in different ways. So it's kind of my paraphrase of what people say is the one morning I woke up in a box and I had no idea how to get out, how I got there, and I had no idea how to get out. And that's about the most lonely feeling you can feel in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So then to be in that situation and know that the person who said they love me is the person who's hurting me, and I can't tell anybody because I'll be in trouble. I mean, there'll be a price to pay for that. So here I sit alone and I've got no one.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, for a lot of people reaching out for shelter services, we're all they got. There's no family, there's no extended family, the network of friends, because the abuser has made it his mission to destroy the relationship with the network of friends and destroy the relationship with the family, so that when she's able to escape, she really does have no one. We're it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not something we take lightly. That's something that we take very, very seriously. But the intent behind those words are 100% sincere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to tell that to people all the time. I'll be the light at the end of the tunnel person for you. I can see it. Sitting here now, having a conversation with you as you're crying and reliving the horrific experiences that you've had, I can still look at that and see that light at the end of the tunnel. I said that to people so many times, and I'll walk with you till you see it.
Mm-hmm.
You let me know.
And I can remember you and your staff saying that to me, that you saw the light at the end of the tunnel. And I just, at the point where I was, when I heard y'all say that, it was just this thing of, it was like I had swallowed a cannonball. I don't see any kind of a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
And I just, it felt horrible. But to hear, okay, here come the tears. But to hear all of you say, I'll walk with you until you see that light. There was nobody who had walked with me through any of that.
Right.
And one thing that I found that was so common that had happened to me was that the family, many times when they do find out the victim has left, is they turn their back on their own flesh and blood,
Right.
you know, and they don't believe them, and on and on and on that goes. So that, y'all were complete strangers to me, and yet you were willing to walk with me until I saw the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
And the tears are coming, and this is almost 20 years after the fact. Does that tell you how deep that went?
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah,
why it's so important that we continue to say that.
it is. It is. And I just want to speak to anybody who's watching, that you're thinking about escaping, and wanting to set up an escape plan. You're trying to figure out how in the world does that work. It's worth it. It is definitely worth it. And there are people out there who are, they're so ready to help you, and they are going to be walking with you. Even though you don't know them now, they're going to be ready to walk with you until you do see the light at the end of the tunnel. You'll find people just like that.
Even if I have to put on sunglasses, I'll keep walking
Yeah,
because it's so
definitely.
important. You know, and I've been accused of being, and I pretty much claim it, the eternal optimist anyway. And so I would rather help someone begin to see themselves on that journey as opposed to any other kind.
Mhm.
And I'm not silly. Like, I know it takes a minute. Just because I can see it today, it may be 6 months before another person can begin to see it or whatever else. But
Mhm.
it's still worth investing that time.
It is, because I've said this to you and your staff before, and I'll say it to everybody who has any part in helping victims escape and become survivors and thrivers. You are changing lives. It's just like I put in the front of my book, the dedication. And for the longest time, I could not read this out loud without just bawling, having to
Yeah,
stop and just bawl. You know what I'm going to read, don't you?
I
I
do.
see that smile on your face.
Yeah.
So hopefully, now that I've started crying, hopefully this is not going to. This book is dedicated to every staff member and volunteer of a domestic violence shelter, both past and present. No, the tears are coming. Each one of you is a hero to me. Many untold success stories, as well as my own, would not be possible without your willingness to serve the men and women who have found themselves in a time of crisis. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Truly, countless lives have been spared due to your tireless efforts. I salute you. As you carry on your difficult work, please know you are deeply appreciated. And I mean that with my heart, all of my heart.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, that means something to people doing the work that I do when they hear somebody say something like that. Case in point, a few weeks ago at a staff meeting, I had somebody read that very same thing.
Did you?
And the people in the room, with the exception of one, me and one other person, nobody else knew you.
Oh, wow.
But the heartfelt sentiment that those words shared, they received and it touched them.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. That's exactly what I want.
Because I think that people on my side of it, we truly do just want to make a change. We truly do. You know, I'm not kidding. It's been years that I've said it, but I'm not kidding when I say I'm working myself in unemployment. I really do want to facilitate that change. And if you're called to do the work that I do, the work that you do, you're called.
Yeah.
If you're called, you can't stop.
Mm-mm.
You really do want to see that change happen. And so very rarely though, I don't want to say rarely because that sounds negative, because it's not rarely. Frequently, I'm going to say frequently. Frequently, we do have survivors that will say thank you. Frequently, we have survivors that don't. But you know, we don't do it for the thank you. But when someone shares a sentiment, it's like what you shared at the beginning of the dedication in your book, it meant something to my employees. I just want you to know that.
That's really awesome. See,
Yeah.
that chokes me up. Just hearing that, because that's exactly why I put that in there.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was sitting at my computer writing that, I mean, the tears would just flowing down my face, you know, because it came from so deep within me. I literally believe, and I don't know if I've shared this on my program before or not, but I really believe if I had stayed and had not had anywhere to go, I really don't believe I would be alive at this point. And I have a couple reasons for that. The psychologist I was able to see for 2 years after I left my abuser, she said, "I'm so glad that you were able to leave, because I really believe that you would have gotten severely ill and possibly died." And I said, "You mean like cancer or something?" And she said, "Yeah, that's a real possibility." And I didn't understand that for years after that. But stress can do that to a person. And I ended up teaching a class for a year or two on stress, actually, and what it can do to you physically. And that actually helped me to begin to put into practice the things that I was teaching my class about what you do to handle that stress and how vital that is.
Yeah. I would be thrilled if in a future episode you share that information with us.
It was actually for a specific setting, but I could look that up. I know I still have it.
Yeah,
And I could look
that
that
would
up.
be super interesting.
Okay. Yeah. I could do that. I would
Just
have to
throw it out
adapt
there.
it for, yeah, absolutely. I would have to adapt it for this setting, you know.
Sure.
And the other reason I think I would not be alive was because all 3 of my kids individually called me within probably a couple of months, I'll say, after I had left. And each one of them individually said, "I'm so glad that you left, Mom, because I really believe that Dad," at that time they were still calling him Dad, "would have killed you if you'd stayed." And I totally believe that. To me, that was confirmation that,
Absolutely.
you know, that what I had experienced was, or what I had felt all that time. I could never have said that to anybody. I couldn't have gotten the words out because it would have sounded like I was literally ready for the nut house. You know, I mean, really, because he had this image that he had built that just made him look like this wonderful person. You know, he was a coach. He worked with as a volunteer with the local police department. He was a deacon in the church. And, you know, you could just go on and on and on with this stuff. It was all an image thing. It had nothing to do with what was really going on here.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't real.
It wasn't real. None of it was real. And I really did fear for my life those last few years, and especially that last 15 months that I was there with him. Very scary, very scary.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. Do you want to say anything else? Add any other information?
Hmm. Can't think of anything right now.
Okay. Thank you for letting me pick your brain, even though you don't know what I'm going to say. This is
That's my
awesome.
favorite.
It's my favorite too,
Yeah.
because
If
then
all we ever did is sit here and ask each other questions, I think that'd be great.
I do too. I tell you what, I am going to throw this one out to you just because it's been eating at me and it has nothing to do with empowering.
Okay.
You do such a good job with interviews. Have you ever taken an interview course, like on how to interview people?
No,
Are you
no,
serious?
no,
Because
no, I'm serious.
I'm seriously thinking maybe I need to take an interview course because you are so good at it.
I'll tell you what my teacher was. Support groups. Support groups taught me from the very first support group I ever led. Let's go backwards. The very first support group I ever led at the crisis center was done in this way. Hey, I just fired so and so. Could you do group tonight? And I was like, sure. So I had no idea
Oh,
how the crisis center ran a group because I'd never been to one because I was a couple of weeks old in my job.
wow.
No idea. I had no idea who the support group attendees were because at that time I was the court advocate, not a primary direct service advocate, victims advocate at the time. And so I learned how to do support groups working with people coming to the support group. And so what I learned from the very first night was listen to people when they tell their story, show them that you're listening by reframing the things they're saying, and then following up with the question on that. So what I hear you saying is this question. And that's how I learned how to do support groups. And so I have really honed in on the reframing part of it
Mm-hmm.
to where I can communicate to somebody, I'm listening to what you're saying, and then that prompts me to want to know this about what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's not a class, it's just listening to people tell their stories for 25 years.
Yeah.
You kind of get into the habit of, oh, I need to know more about that. If I'm going to help this person with this thing, I need to know more about that. So let me ask you more about that. And then there's nothing off the table. If someone comes to you and says, I'm ready, willing, and able to be interviewed by you, then you can ask them anything you want. They may not want to answer everything, and that's okay too. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
no, that's the only way I ever learned how. Yeah. And interviewing people in like the job setting and such. But those are basically the same standard set of questions I ask everybody. So it's a little bit different. But even in my interviews, honestly, I go off paper all of the time because I
I'm
want
not
to know what you meant
surprised.
by that.
Yeah. I can see you doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I learned I don't, not that I know how to interview, but I think I learned how to converse with people because as you know, my dad was a pastor, and so that means my mom was a pastor's wife, and she had a heart of a pastor's wife, even though she remarried after he divorced her. She remarried and never, to the day she died, she never lost that compassion for people,
Yeah.
and even though dad was a mess, he really did care about people. And probably one of the, well, what I saw as one of the most frustrating times were like if he's watching the news and there's been a fire, a house fire, or somebody's been murdered, or whatever the would be on the news, and it just literally just ate him up on the inside. And I think that's where I learned a lot of compassion and understanding and trying to put myself in their shoes. I don't know if this is how you feel, and I'm not trying to put my feelings onto you, but this is how I would feel in that situation. And usually it's spot on, and they'll say, yeah, I can't believe, that somebody could understand that, is essentially the kind of reaction that I get. So is
Sure.
that part of where you're coming from as well?
Sure. I mean, you're basically describing kind of reframing in a little bit of a different way. So yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay.
And then, the other part that goes with the whole reframing thing is then summing it up. So here's all these things, and let me make sure that I've got you, I understand where you're coming from. Now let's sum that up. So then what you're saying is this, and this. So that's probably why this, and this. Like, even kind of redirect in the conversation and such.
Mhm.
So
But I think that last part, I think you got from all of your psychology and everything in school too.
I don't know.
Yeah,
No offense, but I mean, maybe it's possible. Then I just put it into practice. I don't know.
yeah.
It's been so long since I've been in school.
But you look so young. I can't believe it.
The one room schoolhouse, that whole thing. It's been a while.
You mean you don't want to go back?
Nah, I don't think so.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, not to discount my education in any way. Yeah, I'm sure I learned some of that, but it's so interesting that you say that, and it's just an off the wall thought, but it's so interesting when you're a student in those college classes and you're learning these things. You learn them so that you can pass a test. And then
Yeah.
I wonder, now that you say that, I wonder how many times, unbeknownst to me, that came to the forefront of my mind because I learned it somewhere. Because you've heard me say before, I don't know where that came from. I didn't even know I knew that. Well, I usually credit God for that, but
Mhm.
it's also possible that maybe my education kicks in sometimes too. I don't know.
Give a shout out to your former profs.
Right? Them and God.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
They work together on that one.
Yes, definitely. Well,
Yeah.
I always glean so much. So I just I don't want to make it sound like this is just something I have to say at the end of each program, but I really
I'll slip you some money later.
right? But I really do appreciate you just coming on and talking to us about this stuff and answering questions and uh, just being available to teach us. It, I've said this before too. I could not do this program by myself because the only thing I'm an expert on is my own life. And you have a well-rounded view of this horrible trauma that so many of us have lived through. And so I just appreciate you saying, yeah, sign me up. I'll come talk. I'll come teach. You
I
know,
love to teach. I love to teach.
it's clear that you do.
Nah, I'm not silly enough to think that I know everything, because I know that I don't. But and so one of these days you're gonna ask me a question, I'm gonna flat out say I have no idea. And I will say that if it comes to that point. So I mean, it's obvious that could happen at some point, but I really do love to teach, and I like to try to figure it out. And so sometimes you'll ask me a question and I'll start, and as I'm starting to answer that question, I figure it out as I'm talking and it comes out. So
Yeah, I can see the wheels turning in your head, and I can hear that kind of a processing in your own head as you're doing that. I think it's great.
I just hope it makes sense.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not the only advocate on the planet, and so
Right.
I think sometimes I wonder how somebody else would answer that question. I'm answering it
Yeah.
from my perspective with the knowledge that I have been able to glean over the years, and so there's times I'm like, I wonder how somebody else would answer that question, just to see if we're on the same page or not, or I'm way off base, or I don't know, but
You know, it's just like with you hear about family members that go through the same traumatic event. And let's say there's four of them. And each one of those four is going to tell a different story because they saw it from their camera. Sometimes I think about my eyes. They're my camera lens to everything
right.
I see in life. And so I'm going to see something different than the person next to me, even though they experience the same thing. So I'm going back and I'm going to pull a Becky here.
Oh
I don't,
no.
yeah, I know. Now you're going to get subject to your own words here. I don't
Oh,
think,
Becky, that sounds scary.
but it's like you tell the victims that are in the shelter and the survivors, and you tell them there is no wrong answer. You know,
Right.
there
Right.
could probably be, it's like you were saying with in the last episode we did, you've heard several different answers as to what empowering means, and you've never heard the same answer twice, but none of them were wrong. And I've thought the same thing that you said. I wonder like what another shelter advocate would say to this. But I just appreciate you taking your 25 years of experience doing this and bringing it to us and laying it out on the table in a very simple manner to where we can easily understand it. I just think it's beyond invaluable. So thank you. And I every time when I say that, I really mean it. Yeah, because it means a lot to me.
Well, it's my
Um,
pleasure. I mean, I would have never created videos. I would have never created a YouTube channel. I would have never done any of that unless the day you said, "Would you?" and I said, "I think I will." You know, I have what I have. I have my perspective and I have experience and such, but I never would have put it together in this form had you not said, "Would you?" And so I'm incredibly grateful to you for doing that. So I think that's why it works.
yeah, this is true. And this is, as you already know, for those of you who are watching, um, go back and watch my interview. This is the furthest thing from my mind I ever thought I would be doing. Never in my wildest imagination. It is the weirdest thing to this day to go and just see what's on YouTube that I can listen to while I'm working today. And there's my face on YouTube.
I know.
It's
I know. I
surreal.
was actually looking for a specific song lyrics and chords the other day, and I pulled up a soundbite on YouTube, and I scrolled a little bit longer, a little bit further to see if there were other. Oh, I know what I was doing. I was watching a tutorial on how to play a banjo, and so I scrolled down a couple more, and lo and behold, there we were. I
It's
was like,
weird, isn't it?
"What are we doing here? I'm trying to learn how to play the banjo," and here our faces came up. So it's very surreal.
Very, very surreal. I was watching this weekend on a lot of things from Great Britain because as this taping, the Queen it hasn't been a week yet since she died, Queen Elizabeth II. And so I'm scrolling through and I'm watching different videos, and all of a sudden, after one that was on the Queen, there was us. Thought, okay, this does not belong together.
One of
I'm
these
not
things
getting,
is not like the other.
yeah, no, I'm not getting any association here. I'm not getting where YouTube pulled that up for me.
It would sooner say it's our search history.
It is, and I know that, but it just seems so out of place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
surreal. Well, since I read something out of my book, I will go ahead, and I haven't done this for a while, but here is a copy of my book, Free to Soar. And I wrote this at the time. It was 39 years of abuse that I had lived through. It is now 48 years of domestic violence that I have survived. And it's more than just my story, because it made no sense to me to just put another book out there on the shelves to sell. So in the back, what I have is I have every kind of domestic violence listed, and I'm a nerd, so they're listed alphabetically, and there's examples and uh, definitions for each. Sorry for the blank in the head there. And then there's another section at the very back on additional resources that you can use. Let's say maybe you don't have the internet at home, and so you could take this book and use it, and there's phone numbers and all sorts of places that you could go for help. As of right now, I'm still needing an answer from my publisher. I don't see where I could give you a link and then you could order from my publisher. So at this point, just Google it. And I know it's available at walmart.com and amazon.com, lots of different places. So you can order it from there. But it's free to soar. And my name is Rebecca Adams. So there's that. Since I read that introduction or my dedication in the book,
and I think people should buy it, and I think people should read it. I still stand in awe of the ability that you had to be so vulnerable and transparent and put your story in writing like that anybody could see. But I think that there's a real powerful lesson in taking the time to sit and read it and see where you were then and now here where you are now, and what a phenomenal change you've made in your life. And, you know, I say all the time that you're the poster child for thriving, and people need to be aware of that. And they need to read your story.
Thank you. That's quite a compliment. I'm sure I've heard you say that before, about the poster child for thriving, but thank you. That's an awesome compliment. Thank you.
Well, I think it's true. So,
and that's one thing I appreciate about you, because I know anything that comes out of your mouth is honest. You don't say it unless you mean it.
I'm honest to a fault.
And I'm not sure if my friends appreciate that about me or not, because I am too. And they're probably sometimes they're probably wanting me to not be quite so honest.
Well, that's when you're lovingly honest. I'm lovingly honest, but I'm still honest.
There you go. There you go.
That's the catch.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Becky. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And folks, remember that no matter where you are in the process, you are always free to soar.